Welcome, listeners, to a spine-tingling session of creepypasta that's sure to haunt your dreams. Tonight, we delve into 3 chilling tales from the twisted minds of stalkers who are filled to their cores with obsession. Each story intertwines personal struggles and fears with encounters that start in the digital world and slip into disturbing reality. From sinister stalkers to eerie encounters in basements and hotel rooms, these narratives will challenge your comfort with the unknown. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare to be unnerved as we explore the eerie consequences of letting strangers get too close. Stay tuned, keep your doors locked, and remember, sometimes the real horror is just a click away. Story 1. The Windshield Message. The echoes of the breakup had barely faded when the strange occurrences began. It had been a particularly rough split, filled with cold silences and bitter accusations, so when it was finally over, I felt a peculiar mixture of relief and emptiness. My roommate, Dan, found the first note. It was tucked under the windshield wiper of my car one gray morning. "I would have cleaned your car if you didn't cut me off," it read. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, loopy, with overly adorned F's and T's, a ghostly reminder of a presence I was desperately trying to forget. I brushed it off as a weird, parting shot, a final jab after a knockout fight. But the next day, things escalated. I was sipping my second cup of coffee when the incessant ringing of my doorbell began. Through the camera feed, her face appeared, eyes wide with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. She pressed the button again and again, each ring sharp like a jab to my senses. Ignoring her, I hoped she would get the message and leave. Instead, an hour later, the phone rang. It was the front office of my apartment complex. The clerk sounded uncomfortable as she relayed that my ex had just been there, spinning a tale about how she hadn't seen me in weeks and was worried sick. She had asked for a key to my apartment, claiming it was urgent to check on me. The clerks, knowing my regular appearances in the office for my mail and packages, thankfully refused her request. They mentioned she lingered around, staring up at my apartment window from the parking lot, her figure a dark silhouette against the fading daylight. That night, I double-checked all the locks on my doors and windows, a niggling paranoia settling in. I texted her, asking her to respect my space and boundaries, but all I got back was a cryptic, "Just making sure you're okay." The following morning, under the guise of a chilly dawn, I found another note. This time, it was stuck to my door. "You're not answering your phone. I'm getting worried you might be hurt." The message was unsettlingly sweet, laced with a concern that didn't reach her eyes the day before. My phone, which had been right beside me all night, had no missed calls or messages except for hers. Over the next few days, a series of bizarre incidents unfolded. My social media accounts received follow requests from accounts that, upon a closer look, were obviously fake, profiles filled with random, disconnected images, no friends in common, but with her as a mutual. Friends began asking about my abrupt changes in routine, which they apparently heard about from her. I increased my security measures, changing passwords and adding 2-factor authentication where I could. It wasn't enough. One evening, as I worked on my music, in the dim light of my studio, a shadow flickered across the hallway. I froze, listening intently over the hum of my equipment. The floorboards creaked outside, a slow, deliberate crunch that seemed to sync with the pounding in my chest. Rushing to the door, I flicked on the hall light. The corridor was empty, but the front door was ajar, a crack of dark void that I was sure I hadn't left open. On the floor lay a note, different this time. "Why are you shutting me out? I just want to talk." The police said they'd keep an eye out, but without real evidence, they advised just to stay safe and call if she showed up again. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, of being watched from just beyond the reach of the light. Sleep became a stranger, and every sound a signal of a nightmare turned real. I knew then that this wasn't just a breakup. It was an obsession, one that was wrapping its cold fingers around my once quiet life, threatening to squeeze until there was nothing left but fear. Story 2: Taco Bell Nightmare. After the turmoil of my recent breakup and losing my job, I was desperate for a fresh start. Landing a position as a shift leader at Taco Bell felt like a step toward stability. It was close enough to walk from my apartment, a small blessing as I tried to cut back on expenses, reflecting my newfound focus on personal growth and frugality. During these walks, I often pondered over my dreams filled with snakes, symbols of transformation and rebirth, which I hoped were omens of better days ahead. Yet, amidst this backdrop of personal recovery and introspection, a new shadow began to loom over my daily routine. A man, just a bit older than myself, started appearing regularly at the restaurant. At first, his presence was a benign fixture, a friendly face among the many I'd served daily. He was polite, always engaging cheerfully with me at the front registers, or when I manned the drive-thru. However, as days turned into weeks, his friendly demeanor began to feel oppressive. He was there during every shift I worked, his visits too frequent to be coincidental. I confided in my coworkers and my former partner, worried but unsure if my recent experiences were clouding my judgment, making me see threats where there were none. Perhaps the fear that once made me dread even my own musical instruments, fearing their sounds might evoke deeper, darker emotions, was now making me paranoid about ordinary people. The situation escalated the day I arrived at work to find him being trained by one of the assistant managers. Panic gripped me as I realized he was weaving himself into my everyday life, not just as a customer, but as a colleague. I rushed to the store manager, my heart pounding with anxiety. She was shocked. She recognized him as a frequent visitor, but had no idea about the extent of his fixation. Acting swiftly, she arranged his immediate transfer to another store, assuring me it would be his new home base after today. She even let me take the day off, calling in another manager to cover the shift. The relief was palpable, yet short-lived. Returning to work the next day, I learned he had quit upon hearing the news of his transfer, unable to accept the change. But his absence didn't bring the peace I hoped for. He returned several more times, each visit like a ghost from my recent past haunting me. Determined to protect my newfound peace, I had my brother, whom I stayed with occasionally since the breakup, sit in the dining area during my shifts. His presence seemed to unnerve the stalker, and eventually I stopped seeing him altogether. Reflecting on the ordeal, I recognized the echoes of my past fears in this new challenge. The incident reminded me of the importance of boundaries and the need to stand firm in protecting my space, both personal and professional. As I continued to navigate my recovery, focusing on self-improvement and grappling with my fears, the experience became another step in my journey of resilience and rebirth, much like the symbolic snakes in my dreams. Story 3: The Sociopath. After the chaos of the breakup with my ex, I was desperate for some grounding. The offer from a group I met at the hospital seemed innocuous at first, just some reading material and discussion groups focused on self-help. However, it didn't take long to recognize the underlying currents of Scientology they were subtly weaving into every conversation, an attempt at brainwashing that I was quick to resist. This need for control was something I had terrifyingly experienced before, in a relationship that left deep scars. I dated this guy, a narcissistic sociopath, for a few months, and each day was more harrowing than the last. His paranoia was suffocating. He would ask chilling questions like, "Would you ever cheat on me? If I took your panties for DNA testing, they wouldn't find anything, right?" His threats were even more explicit, menacingly putting on a pair of brass knuckles as he spoke of killing anyone who might tempt me away from him. The nightmare didn't end there. We worked together, lived in the same house, which gave him ample opportunities to invade my privacy. He'd take my phone while I was asleep to read my texts, and on one chilling winter drive, he threw my car into park while we were moving, just to seize my phone from my hand. His control was a vice I couldn't escape. When he jumped out of the car, I managed to throw him into a snowbank in sheer frustration, though he later claimed at work he had simply slipped on ice. The terror escalated when our workplace opened a second store, and I moved there to work, hoping for some respite. Instead, he haunted my new workplace, driving by constantly, leaving notes on my car in a relentless campaign of intimidation. One Friday night, seizing a moment I knew he was scheduled at work, I tried to retrieve my belongings from our shared house. I barricaded myself in my room, but within minutes, he was there, banging on the door and screaming. His fury was palpable when I tried to leave, nearly grabbing me in his rage. The ordeal reached its peak when he followed me onto the highway, trying to rear-end my car in a terrifying chase that felt ripped from a horror movie. His obsession knew no bounds, stalking me across town, his car a constant shadow in my rearview mirror. I sought legal protection, attempting to obtain restraining orders, but all were denied. His brother's influence as a county sheriff cast a long shadow. His spies, friends, and connections seemed omnipresent, a network designed to keep me under his watch. Eventually, I escaped by moving out of state, leaving behind the fear and control. Years later, I returned, only to discover he had passed away 6 months prior to my return. The news brought a complex mix of relief and unresolved anger. This past relationship was a stark reminder of how deeply someone could try to control another's life, mirroring the manipulation I now recognized in the group from the hospital. As I continued to reject their advances and focus on my own path, fortified by the struggles I had overcome, I knew the value of my freedom was something I would never again compromise.